Donald Trump will host Turkish President Recep Erdogan at the White House on September 25th. The U.S. president wrote about this on his social media. According to Trump, the meeting will cover trade and military agreements, including a major purchase of Boeing aircraft, an F-16 contract, and continued negotiations on the F-35. Trump expressed hope that the negotiations would end positively. The American president also emphasized that he has a very good relationship with Erdogan and is looking forward to the meeting. It has also become known that the U.S. president's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., met with Turkish President Recep Erdogan in Istanbul last week during an unannounced visit. This was reported by Middle East Eye, citing sources. The publication notes that the first to report the visit of the U.S. president's son was the chairman of Turkey's opposition Republican People's Party, Özgür Özel. Subsequently, a source close to Erdogan confirmed that Trump Jr. did indeed meet with the Turkish president, but according to the source, it was merely a courtesy visit. According to the source, the situation in the Gaza Strip was not discussed at the meeting. In addition, the president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, will pay a working visit to New York from September 21st to 23rd, where he will participate in the 80th session of the UN General Assembly and hold talks with Donald Trump as well as with the leaders of several countries and international organizations. Also, President Zelenskyy, during a meeting with journalists on September 20th, announced a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets violated Estonian airspace over the Gulf of Finland and remained there for about 12 minutes. This was reported by Estonian National Broadcasting, citing the press service of the General Staff of the Estonian Defense Forces on Friday, September 19th. The report states that the aircraft had no flight plans and their transponders were turned off. At the time of the violation, there was also no two-way radio communication with Estonia's air traffic control service. According to Politico, the MiG-31s were flying toward the Estonian capital before NATO scrambled Italian F-35s to intercept them. Estonian Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna called the incident an unprecedented act of audacity and reminded that this is already the 4th violation this year. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the Russian Chargé d'Affaires in Estonia and handed him a note of protest. After the violation of its airspace by Russian fighter jets, Estonia appealed to NATO for consultations under Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty. The head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, called the Russian incursion into the airspace a dangerous provocation. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy also responded to the incursion of Russian fighter jets into Estonian airspace. He called this incident a systematic Russian campaign of aggression against Europe, against NATO, and against the entire Western world.
Russian fighter jets have once again violated NATO airspace, this time in Estonia. This is unacceptable. Russian destabilization is spreading to new countries and directions.
American President Donald Trump also commented on the Russian air provocation.
I don't like it when things like this happen. This could lead to serious problems. I will be informed about it.
A hint that NATO countries could respond more decisively and shoot down the aggressor's planes was made by the Lithuanian Minister of Defense. The minister recalled the incident in 2015 near the Syrian-Turkish border. At that time, Turkish military personnel recorded the incursion of 2 Russian Su-24 aircraft into the country's airspace. Within 5 minutes, the military issued 10 warnings to the Russian pilots and then shot down one of the planes.
Czech President Petr Pavel has called on NATO countries to respond firmly to Russian provocations. The Czech leader made this statement while commenting on the incursion of Russian fighter jets into Estonian airspace. According to the president, in such situations it is permissible to shoot down Russian aircraft. He said,
"I have to call this extremely irresponsible behavior. After all, violating airspace is grounds for activating defensive mechanisms and, consequently, for shooting down such an aircraft. And that is something that neither our side nor the Russian side would want."
The Czech president recalled that Turkey responded firmly to Russian provocations by shooting down a Russian Su-24 bomber in November 2015. Petr Pavel also shared that during his time as chairman of the NATO Military Committee, he directly asked the Russian representatives why they carried out such provocations. At that time, the Russians replied to him, "Because we can." The Czech leader emphasized,
"I believe that we must be extremely firm in that if there is a violation of the rules, we must respond to it appropriately, including by military means. Russia will very quickly realize that it has made a mistake, that it has crossed acceptable boundaries."
Meanwhile, British fighter jets have already begun patrolling the skies over Poland, making their first flight as part of NATO's Eastern Sentinel mission to protect the country's airspace. As is known, 2 Typhoon fighter jets took off from a British military base on the evening of September 19th to patrol Polish airspace and defend against aerial threats from Russia. UK Defence Secretary John Healey stated that this mission sends a clear signal that NATO airspace will be defended. In addition, what is likely the last of the Russian drones that violated the country's airspace on September 10th has been discovered in Poland. According to RBC, it was found by a resident of the town of Korce in a field just a few dozen meters from residential houses. The district prosecutor's office stated that the drone was a mock-up. Drones from the main intelligence directorate carried out a successful operation in temporarily occupied Crimea, striking the occupiers' expensive helicopters as well as a radar station. According to the agency, the fleet of Russian occupiers on the Crimean Peninsula has once again been reduced as a result of the successful combat operation by the GUR Special Unit Ghosts. It is noted that as a result of the operation, 3 enemy Mi-8 multi-purpose helicopters and an expensive Russian Nebo-U radar station were destroyed. The intelligence officers in particular showed a photo of the wreckage of one of the destroyed Mi-8 helicopters. Meanwhile, in Lviv, a new domestic underwater drone called Toloka was unveiled, which is capable of destroying the Crimean Bridge. The weapon was presented at the Defense Tech Valley Investment Summit. At the exhibition, 3 modifications of the Toloka underwater drone were demonstrated, ranging in length from 4 to 12 meters, capable of striking targets at distances of up to 2,000 kilometers and carrying up to 5 tons of payload. According to experts, several large Toloka drones are potentially capable of destroying the Crimean Bridge, since 5 tons of explosives make it possible to effectively destroy large targets. The Crimean Bridge, which was illegally built by the aggressor country Russia, remains one of the main strategic targets for the Ukrainian armed forces. Let us recall that in June of this year, the underwater section of the Crimean Bridge was blown up. As a result of the operation carried out by the Security Service of Ukraine, one of the supports holding up the automobile section of the structure was significantly damaged.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy will meet with U.S. President Donald Trump next week on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. The president announced this during a meeting with journalists. The head of state also spoke about preparations for participating in the UN General Assembly session.
We have prepared a framework for security guarantees that Europe is ready to accept, taking into account that the United States of America will be by our side. We have held many discussions. There has been dialogue at various levels, including between the leadership of our armies and general staffs, with Europeans and with Americans. A meeting took place between the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the President of the United States, and it was agreed that we will discuss the relevant matters at our bilateral meeting in New York.
The president also said that Kyiv is establishing contacts to bring back about 1,000 people. Meetings with the Russian delegation could take place as soon as tomorrow, but we need specifics. Speaking about ending the war, the president of Ukraine said,
"No one is considering the Korean scenario or any other alternatives. It may happen that there will be no final document marking the end of the war. Security guarantees can be provided even before the war is over."
Zelenskyy announced that Ukraine is launching a controlled export of weapons. Surplus Ukrainian-made weapons, of which there are enough in storage, are planned to be sold to allies in order to use the proceeds to finance the production of scarce drones.
An important decision has been made regarding the controlled export of our weapons. Right now, we are at a point where we have weapons, we have capabilities, but we lack funding. And it already feels like a constant state, as if we are always facing some kind of shortage. But we really don't want to reduce our production capabilities.
According to the president, Ukraine is discussing coordination with Poland and Romania to shoot down drones in the western regions. According to the head of state, Ukraine will create modern separate assault forces with a drone component. The president also said that attacks on oil refineries in Russia and military depots in the occupied territories have caused disruptions in Russian logistics and the operation of Russian aircraft.
The occupiers are trying to conceal the real situation on the battlefield. This was stated by the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. According to the head of state, enemy maps captured during the counter-offensive in the Donetsk region indicate that the Russians are misleading their own command. Zelenskyy noted that he had seen the positions of Ukrainian forces and assets in electronic form, as well as Russian maps. He said,
"Their reports differ greatly from reality. In places where we have restored our positions, the Russians' maps show the exact opposite."
Zelenskyy recalled that there was a provocation circulating in the information space, claiming that the Russians would supposedly capture Pokrovsk completely within 30 days, and the east by November. The head of state emphasized that these statements do not correspond to reality. In addition, US President Donald Trump stated that Russia is losing the war. He emphasized that the United States is increasing oil production and doing everything possible to lower its price. According to Trump, this creates economic pressure that could accelerate the end of hostilities in Ukraine. The American leader also called on European countries to lower oil prices. Trump added that he is disappointed in the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, it has become known that General Alexander Lapin has been dismissed from the Russian army. He was the head of the Center and North groups and is known for his failures in Ukraine. According to Russian media, Lapin will now become an assistant to the head of Tatarstan, Rustam Minekhanov. The position of commander of the Leningrad military district has been taken by Colonel General Yevgeny Nikiforov.
Ukraine has regained control over 7 settlements in the Donetsk region. During the operation in the Dobropilya direction, Ukrainian defense forces managed to advance 3.7 kilometers into the occupiers' defenses. This was reported by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky. He added that in total 160 square kilometers have been liberated from the occupiers during the operation, and another 171 square kilometers have been cleared of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups. In his evening video address, President Zelenskyy stated that the armed forces of Ukraine continue their counter-offensive actions in the Donetsk direction.
The Pokrovsk area, the Dobropilya area. That was one of the most important directions of the Russian offensive, and they were unable to launch a full-scale offensive there. Our soldiers are destroying their forces. The Russians are suffering significant losses. Our country's exchange fund has also been significantly replenished. Every day, more Russian prisoners are being added.
Putin is sending squads of sick occupiers into the Pokrovsk meat grinder, writes the Telegraph. According to the publication, Russia has formed units from soldiers infected with HIV, hepatitis, and other diseases and sent them into battle. Soldiers in these units wear armbands indicating that they are ill. They have been spotted on the front lines around Pokrovsk, which has become the center of the Kremlin's prolonged and bloody offensive. At the same time, General Keith Kellogg said that behind closed doors, Trump is much harsher toward Putin than he is in public.
He is irritated. He thought that his personal relationship with Putin would yield results. Instead, Putin is deceiving him. Behind closed doors, President Trump is much harsher than he is in public.
In addition, the general admitted that he has disagreements with the President of the United States regarding the path to ending the war in Ukraine. He admitted that he is a proponent of ending the war through a ceasefire.
The aggressor country Russia is losing one of its main sources of war funding. According to Bloomberg, citing sources, the European Union may introduce tariffs targeting the remaining imports of Russian oil. This concerns oil supplies via the Druzhba pipeline, which supplies Hungary and Slovakia. The article notes that these plans are not related to proposals for a new package of European Union sanctions. Unlike sanctions, trade tariffs can be adopted by a majority vote in the EU without the need for unanimity. In addition, the introduction of tariffs will allow European countries to meet a key demand of US President Donald Trump, who is urging Europe to completely abandon Russian oil and gas. Bloomberg also reports that Russia has lost nearly $400 million from oil exports. According to the publication last week, the average daily seaborne export of crude oil fell by 934,000 barrels. This was the largest drop in Russian oil export volumes since July 2024. The reason for this was Ukrainian drone strikes on the oil infrastructure of the aggressor country. Meanwhile, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported the strike on the Samara linear production dispatching station. This is a hub from which the Druzhba oil pipeline and the pipeline to Novorossiysk extend, and through which a significant portion of Russian oil is transited. The Reuters agency also reports on the sharp decline in oil and gas revenues of the aggressor country. According to the publication's calculations, in September of this year, the Russian Federation will receive 592 billion rubles, which is about 23% less than in September 2024. It should be noted that revenues from oil and gas sales make up to a quarter of the Russian budget and are a key source of funding for the war against Ukraine.